after 24 years of doing the same thing, there's always a need, or this kind of fleeting moment of going, let's pack it up and go do something else.
Hello and welcome to Expedition Business, where we discuss the highs and lows of our inspirational entrepreneurs and how on earth they keep the flame of adventure burning. Today we have the honor of talking to Erik Vermeulen, a very colorful character on a grey winter's morning. International speaker, ice crusher, writer of award-winning operas. He can tread water for 3 days in a row, woo women with his trombone, and sleeps once a week. On weekends, to let off steam, he participates in full contact origami. And he has even spoken to Elvis, or at least that is what the synopsis is from his Facebook profile. But before we get to Erik to elaborate on what he does to keep his flame burning, I want to remind you to subscribe to Expedition Business on your favorite podcast platform and share it with all your friends and family. They might start liking you if you do. Today's episode is sponsored by New Echo Solar, because life is too short for load-shedding nightmares. Find the details in the notes to this podcast. And I might add at this point that their solar system is a reason why we can record this session today, because I just can't afford to have to reschedule recordings or miss a deadline. But back to Erik. Erik, what did I miss in your bio?
That bio I wrote probably 15 years ago, when I just popped onto social media and Facebook became a thing, and I've actually completely forgotten about it. But the point is, there's always time in life for humor, for just looking at things a little bit differently. So that's essentially where that comes from.
Okay. Well, I find it very, very amusing. And I like the part where you talked about treading water for 3 days in a row. Can that be true?
No, definitely not. Look, I mean, as a high school student, I did swim at a fairly senior level, but never played water polo, and I don't think I've ever actually attempted treading water for any particular length of time. But our conversation, and I think where this is about to go, is probably going to be a lot like treading water. Not our conversation, but this whole the whole entrepreneurial mindset and aspect. And I think often entrepreneurs do get into that spot where they feel like they're just treading water, and it's just about keeping their head above. And if you look at the last 3 years, and the old business partner of mine last year or the year before actually remarked and said that at this point, if you're not bankrupt, you're winning.
Very, very true. But Erik, just take us a bit back to how on earth did you get to do what you are doing?
I wish I could say it was by design. It was by complete and utter default. My sort of initial career choice, you remember those school days where you sat with your guidance teacher and they said to you, "So, what do you want to be?" And I said to her, "I want to be a doctor." She said, "Don't talk nonsense. Have you seen your maths and science marks?" I'm like, "Of course I've seen them," and stop sounding like my parents. But so my first career choice was to go into medicine. And obviously I never got close to getting admission for that. So I went to study human movement science, and loaded that as medically as possible. But while I was studying that, again, just at that time already with this sort of adventure background of wanting to go outside and do hikes. And I remember in high school planning an expedition to Annapurna in Nepal. And during my studies in human movement science, I then kind of got sidetracked into this world of adventure-based learning and co-authored a book with one of my lecturers about how we can use adventure experiences in order to build corporate teams, and then started my own consultancy in 1999.
Wow.
So it was completely by accident. And we're still at it.
And how many years have you been doing this now?
Well, we started with the adventure education stuff and how to use adventure experiences to build teams. That was about 1995, 1996. And I started Ridgeline, my current consultancy, in January 1999. So that's 24, 26 years.
Wow, that is a long time. Very, very. It almost sounds like that's the age of my eldest child. And I assume it's like a child for you.
Uh, yeah, although the difference, I think, with kids, and I can't really speak of great authority with adult kids because at my age, I've got 8-year-old twins, which is what happens when you have a bunch of other priorities. But, I think kids get relatively easier as they get into their 20s. They might not cost you less, but they definitely get a little bit easier. I don't think business ever gets easier. And particularly, when you are kind of get these curveballs from the last couple of years thrown at you. So yeah, I've got a young adult kid in terms of the business, but yeah, I still don't. I'm still not in a position where people would go and Google, I guess, my business and go, we have to work with this guy. There's still a lot of the treading water, the day-to-day process orientated actions and behaviors that's required in running a successful business.
Do you want to maybe just quickly, for those people who don't know your business yet, just a quick elevator pitch on what you do?
So essentially, Ridgeline is a behavioral strategy consulting business, and we work with companies to help them create the behaviors that allow them to be more profitable. In other words, kind of building the brand from the inside out, because, it's like building this bridge between marketing and HR. And marketing will tell the world how awesome your business is. And then it's up to HR or the people in the business to deliver on that promise. So if you think of the bank that says, how can we help you on a billboard? And then that whole mindset falls completely flat when you walk into a branch and no one's interested in helping you. What I do with companies is I help them from a behavioral culture perspective to create the culture and the behaviors that will allow them to live their brand and be successful. So we work a lot with companies that experience a lot of growth, companies that have gone through a rebrand. And in the last 5 or 6 years, we've done a lot of work in the mergers and acquisition space.
Okay. And as far as I understand, you also take or give people the opportunity to go on your expeditions as part of this whole team building, brand building exercise.
Yes, and it's kind of a marriage between two businesses. So Ridgeline, which is the consulting business, and then I've also been a partner for many years, and now I try to own an expedition travel business called Explore. And through Explore, we lead expeditions globally to some of the 7 summits, and that affords people the opportunity to climb Kilimanjaro, Aconcagua, Elbrus in Russia. Well, maybe not right now. Finland, Antarctica, we walk to the South Pole, we mountain bike across Tibet. So there are a whole bunch of adventures under the Explore brand.
Wow.
And what I'm loving is how I can bring these two worlds together to use the principles that we use on expeditions to allow people to experience success there, come home alive with all their fingers and all their toes, and then use those same principles in building businesses and the behaviors and cultures within the businesses of the clients that I serve.
You've got an expedition coming up to Kilimanjaro in August, if I'm correct?
Yes. On 19th of August, I take 17 people to Kilimanjaro, about 12 of them being high school students.
Wow. And who pays for this?
They do, their parents.
Oh, my greatness. Okay.
It was so interesting, the school contacted me in January, said, listen, we're about to book with a travel agent to go and climb Kili, but we have to speak to you and get some advice first. And at the end of coffee, the organizer basically said, look, we're not going with a travel agent. We want that personal touch. We want that, that authentic experience and the personal experience and guiding that I would offer. And we put a price down. And actually one family, mom, dad, and both kids have signed up and they're going.
Wow. I would love to do that with my kids one day. But tell me quickly, you've mentioned bringing people back with all their fingers and toes. Has it ever happened that they didn't come back with all their fingers and toes?
Not on any of our expeditions, no.
Okay. So we are safe to book with you.
Absolutely. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek selling point. And, you know, in the big scheme of things, you know, lots of people come back from mountaineering expeditions with all their fingers and all their toes. But as always, you know, it's the negative stuff that always attracts a lot of media attention and ends up front and center. Notwithstanding the fact, though, that we have to accept and understand that going to mountains holds inherent risk. And it only becomes life-threatening or a negative risk when you don't respect the environment that you're going into, and you don't, you know, your goals for going are incorrect.
Erik, you've also got another expedition to South America, I think early next year, coming up.
Yes, Aconcagua is the second highest of the 7 summits, and we climb that in January every year because it's obviously summer in the Southern Hemisphere. And what I love about Aconcagua, apart from the fact that it is properly tough, because it's a true expedition-style mountain, what I really love about it is that it's the highest peak outside of Asia, the highest peak in the Southern Hemisphere. And so this funny little thing is that if you summit, there's a 99.999999% chance that you're the highest person standing on this planet, because no one's climbing the Asian 8,000 meter peaks that are higher in winter anymore. The Norwegians and Scandinavians are done with that. So there's a really good chance that if you summit Aconcagua, you're the highest person standing on Mother Earth, wow. Which is quite a weird fact.
And I assume you have done that summit.
Yes, we have.
Okay. But Erik, it sounds like a very big portion of your work and your expeditions is to help other people to stay positive and act positive. I assume you never get times when you just want to pack up and go home.
Oh, no, all the time. After 24 years of doing the same thing, there's always a need, or this kind of fleeting moment of going, you know, let's pack it up and go do something else. And I guess everyone feels that way, not only entrepreneurs, you know, but people who are employed and that sort of thing as well. And I think the reason that happens is that we all yearn intrinsically, without always acknowledging it, we're all yearning for this concept of adventure. And when we were doing the research for the book in the mid-90s, we looked at, you know, the constructs of this concept called adventure. And for many people, adventure is defined by an excursion, a set of activities, going to a place. But what we actually realized is that adventure is the construct of adventure is actually any endeavor of which the outcome is uncertain, which means that your business is an adventure, your life is an adventure, because every day is uncertain. We don't see that uncertainty because we are so mired in our rituals and routines that we firmly believe that tomorrow will be there. But you've got every chance of, you know, when you drive to the mall this morning or to work or home from the office, there's every chance that you could not arrive home from a health issue, about a vehicle accident. You know, life is uncertain. But we don't realize that because our whole life is built around rituals and routines. So if we go back 3 years to lockdown and the pandemic, I'm guessing a lot of people in your network, as in mine, suddenly woke up in the morning and thinking, oh, geez, life is fragile, we could die. But it's no less fragile now than it was then. The reason we suddenly had this epiphany that, you know, we could die today is that our rituals and routines were instantaneously removed from our lives. We don't think about our mortality because we wake up at the same time every morning. We race through our morning routine. We get the kids dressed. We have breakfast. We get in the car. We fight traffic. We drop the kids at school. We go to work. We sit in the same meetings. We see the same people. And we just do that over and over again. And that's why we're not in touch with our mortality. That's why we believe, oh, we can do it tomorrow, the next day, the day after, next month, next year. But the minute we realize that we can't, we don't have any guarantee that we'll be here tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year, that changes our outlook on life.
Absolutely. But Erik, just coming back to your own mortality and your own times when you're not feeling as positive, what are the fun and exciting ways that you use to regroup, refocus, and rejuvenate yourself?
I wouldn't say they're all fun and exciting ways, right?
Okay.
No, look, for me, because I've always been an active person, part of that routine. Let's start by saying routines keep us motivated and grounded. So a big part of my routine is training and exercise. So obviously I need to be in some sort of physical shape to lead expeditions regularly. But I also do that because I like to challenge myself occasionally. You know, every 2 or 3 years, I look for a personal challenge, and I go and do that. So, like, the first thing to keep motivated is just to understand my routines. Secondly, is to see, well, then how do I create endorphins and excitement in my life? So it could be entering a race, it could be chasing a new client, it could be looking to develop a new product, and how we can take that to market. The third thing is in order to get motivated again, is to remind myself of the purpose and meaning what I do has. And in 2020, I created a little challenge. Well, I wanted to walk 200 kilometers across Makgadikgadik Pans, unsupported, unassisted, and came up with this idea in 2019. Some cricketers got to hear about it. They wanted to join me. But 2020, with lockdown, when I was looking for sponsorship for this little physical challenge, I spoke to a guy to help me find the sponsorship. And on that Zoom call with the virtual beer, we created what became known as the Battle of the Sports. And in September and October 2020, I walked 800 kilometers around the Northern Cape on Vermeulen, accompanied for 200 kilometers at a time by some of South Africa's biggest sporting heroes. And what I found with that, so like 200 kilometers is quite a long way. And there was this debate leading up to the event, which was broadcast on SuperSport and became a very well-watched reality TV series. But there was this debate over why 200 kilometers. And why didn't we just make it 100 miles, 160 Ks? And the reason for sticking to 200 Ks is it would almost force everybody to be out in the middle of nowhere for a second and a third night, particularly that third night. Most people can cope with discomfort for 24 hours or 2 days. But the minute it stretches beyond that, discomfort becomes a real problem. And I remember on the first lap of this, we had team rugby with John Smith and Yanni Shamangi and Skalk Brits. So I spent almost 4 days on a salt pan with 3 hookers. That's just
lots
a little
of
joke.
Fun.
But yeah, it was lots of fun. But the guys' feet took proper strain. And we were at about 100 kilometer, 120, and lying half dead. Not really, but like really battling and suffering with sore feet and exhaustion, lying on the salt pan, just under this little bit of shade provided by the medical support vehicle that was there, but didn't give us any support, if that makes sense. And the guys were really talking about this, I could see how tough it was. But what was interesting is that nobody spoke about quitting. And that's kind of one of those rules that are put in place on these kind of things. Because imagine there are four of us, and we're all suffering as much as everybody else, even though some of us might not show it. But the minute one person talks about quitting, that gives the next person permission to agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you've got two people out of four. That's 50% that might say, yeah, you know what, you're right. Let's just pack it in, get in the car and go home. Then it becomes an easy decision to quit.
Mm.
But the reason I discovered on this Battle of the Sports and on other events that I've created is that people don't quit. People push harder, further, longer when they have a purpose beyond themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of that one of those angles is that when I feel demotivated and feel like packing it in and feel like going to get a day job, for me it's around this purpose, particularly around the expedition business, where that purpose for me is to provide a platform for other people to move out of their comfort zone, to grow. I presented a trail running race called the Munga Trail for 3 years, 400 kilometers non-stop trail run.
Mm-hmm.
And in the very first year, we had so the cutoff was 120 hours. And we had two athletes get to the last race village at Berkslak Potholes at about 8 o'clock in the morning. Cutoff was 12 noon. So they had 4 hours to cover the last 20 kilometers all along the rim of the Blyde River Canyon. And Regardt Janse van Rensburg, I think that was his surname, Regardt out of Jeffries made it inside the last minute.
Wow.
And the other person who was there with him just kind of faded. And what was so interesting is that both athletes were pretty wrecked. They'd done exactly the same time up to that last race village at Berkslak. What was it that pushed one to go further, harder, stronger, and not the other one, given the same set of circumstances?
Yes.
And it came out that Regardt had entered Munga Trail and was doing this race to raise funds for the NSRI in Jeffreys Bay. It was a stark reminder that when you have a purpose beyond that, and it's not about letting yourself down, but it's about creating meaning for others, you're able to go so much further.
Absolutely. What's interesting is that nowadays something like a 200 mile is a fairly common event, and it's becoming more common as we go along. More people enter 200-mile trail races nowadays. Is it because somebody else has done it before?
Look, when we started Munga Trail, no one had done anything like that in South Africa. And so it was pretty much a groundbreaking effort. Now, a lot of these races have popped up. I wouldn't say, or I wouldn't agree that there are more people entering 200 milers. If you look at some of those races, or in fact, all of them, they are hybrid races. So there's the 200-mile option, there's a 100-mile option, there's a 100-kilometer option, there's a 50-kilometer option. And when you look at the spread of entries, you're still... So we had, on Munga Trail, I think the first year we had about 30 entries, and then it dwindled to about 18 in the third year. And then COVID hit when we were going to have the fourth edition in 2020. Now, looking at the numbers on the current races, those ultra distance numbers are not increasing. They're still around the 20 entry mark for the 400K, the 200-kilometer, the 200-mile races. And those events are making the numbers from the shorter races.
Okay, interesting. Just a quick question. What would be your major challenges that you have faced in your career? And how did you get over it?
I think as a speaker and a consultant, the main challenge is twofold. I think one is standing out from the crowd. Consulting, speaking, even the expedition space have relatively low barriers to entry. You know, when I started as an international keynote speaker in 1999, the only way to get onto a platform was to find yourself a speaker's agent or a speaker's bureau, convince them about your right to stand on a stage and deliver a message, and then they would market you. Since then, of course, the internet has exploded, and now literally anybody can build a website, call themselves a speaker, and just kind of clutter the market with often with very little insight and very little gravity or gravitas to their message. So that's the first thing is to stand out. And then the second thing is to constantly create compelling content. You know, there is so much research in the world. There is so much knowledge. And the challenge is to marry that plethora of information with a compelling message, and then to deliver it to companies as a consultant and as a speaker through simplifying that complexity and making the content and the message truly accessible. And this sounds quite abstract, but it's actually applicable to any business, because every business that you start as an entrepreneur should be revolving around a real problem that you solve for your customers. If you don't know what that problem is that you're solving, you're literally falling into this trap of trying to be everything to everyone, or trying to be just like everybody else. And I think most entrepreneurs kind of see what someone else is doing, and they go, "Yeah, that looks really cool. I think I should do that." And so, what is it that makes you stand out? What makes you stand out is firstly the problem that you solve, and then the process, your unique way of solving that problem. And when we quantify those two, that allows us to build a strong brand for our entrepreneurial business, and that allows us to access the market.
And I suppose you've got lots of experience battling this out on a day-to-day basis.
Well, it never stops, right? Because there's always a new challenge. There's always a new battle to fight. And one of those key principles that I live by, and that we use on mountains and in business, is this whole principle of finding purpose in the process. You know, if we use the mountain analogy, altitude will kill you. There's no doubt about that. You know, you might recall 6 or 7 years ago, South African rally driver Gugu Zulu died on Kili, and South Africans were amazed, and we were getting so many questions like, "How can someone die on Kili? It's a little hill in our backyard." No, it's not. Kili's a 6,000 meter high mountain. Okay, 5,800, but it is dangerous. And when you don't understand the process of getting to a summit, that is going to kill you. And so, interestingly, one of the first things I do when someone signs up to go to a mountain with me, or when we look at working with companies in the business consulting space, is I reframe the victory condition. If, you know, for many people, lots of people want to go and climb Kili. And I say to them, "Why do you want to climb Kili?" And they say, "Because I want to stand on the summit." Like, why do you want to stand on the summit? You know, if it's a little piece of earth like every other piece of earth, what is it that's drawing you to stand on this particular piece of earth? And so they say, you know, like, "Yeah, but it's about a personal challenge." But then make it the personal challenge. Don't define the victory condition by an outcome. So if your mountaineering expedition is defined by this outcome, there's a high chance it's going to kill you, because you're not going to respect the process. If your business life is defined by an outcome, by an income, by a balance sheet, it's not going to be long before you fall prey to fraud, corruption, because that outcome eventually becomes the only thing you chase, and you will do anything to achieve that outcome. So there's business death around that, as there is like personal death around chasing personal outcomes. Fall in love with the process.
Mm-hmm. And know the why.
Yes. And so what we find is that by redefining the victory condition into an experience rather than an outcome, we actually end up getting more people to summits than the average of expeditions on the mountains that we guide. We turn fewer people back. People are more inclined to turn themselves back. And the third fascinating result of reframing the victory condition is that if somebody turns themselves back, they are very likely to come back to the same mountain with us in the future or to another mountain. They don't leave there defeated. Because, at the end of the day, mountains are weird things because it takes you, in the case of Aconcagua, almost 3 weeks to get to this little piece of earth that you call the summit. And what do you do when you get there? Well, firstly, you feel terrible. You have a look around, maybe enjoy the view if it's not cloudy and overcast.
And take a few photos.
Yes. Thirdly, you take a selfie or two, and then you turn around and you go right back the same way that you came up. And what took you over 2 weeks to get up takes you a day and a half to get down. Like, seriously, what is the point? Mm-hmm. The point is that you come back to the same place, but you come back as a different person. So it's about the process. It's about the experience. It's not about standing on this little piece of earth.
Yep, definitely. Erik, just quickly, what would be your biggest disappointments that you had to face in your life and specifically in your business?
Oh, gosh. I'm not one to dwell on disappointments. The reason being, disappointments are part of the process. And if you look back on your life, anybody for that matter, you will fail far more often than you succeed. That's a given. I work with sports teams as team catalyst and mind coach. And dealing with these young professional sportsmen, firstly, they're still battling to distinguish between life and sport. They're saying that, but sport is my life. No, it's not. Your life is your life. Sport is just part of it. But, I speak to these young sportsmen, cricketers in particular, and they really battle to come to grips with this concept that they will fail at every innings because you will bat until you're out. And they equate losing your wicket with failing. Mm-hmm. And it's the same in business. If you're in sales, oh gosh, I hate sales. Like, seriously, it just like freaks me out. But you're going to get far more no's than you are going to get yeses. So if we get into this mindset of saying, well, oh gosh, failure is so bad, yada, yada, then you are going to just become negative and shut your business down. Mm-hmm. The fact is that you learn nothing from success. You learn everything from failure. Absolutely. And then figuring out how to do it differently next time around.
Okay, so what would be examples of one or two of your failures? If you can remember them, because it does sound like they don't exist anymore.
Look, I'm not great at relationships, right? So all my ex-wives would agree that marriage is probably one of those things that I fail at. But from a business and a mountaineering perspective, there are times. So 2020's Aconcagua expedition, I got really sick on the mountain and I didn't summit. Which was kind of, could be seen as a failure. But I still got more than 50% of the team that I was leading to summit. And I think from the kind of learning from that sort of failure is that, leaders and entrepreneurs cannot make it all about themselves. And it's around, as a leader, how you guide the people that you lead in order for them to achieve their pinnacle or their victory condition. So how much do we empower them? And, I've always taken that approach of, on the expeditions and in business, the people who work for me, the people I lead on expeditions, give them as much information as possible to allow them to make their own decisions. And, so looking back, we think that I might have actually had COVID on Aconcagua in January 2020. But I turned myself back the day before, the morning that we would have gone up to summit camp. But by then, I'd put the team in place. We'd had all our logistics in place. The team literally just had to get to summit camp and follow the process, find that purpose in the process for summit day. And I turned myself back. I went down to base camp and got helicoptered out. So,
And how
we
does
can
that
see that.
feel? If you in a helicopter and you know the people that you've taken there is being left behind, how do you feel?
It requires, so the first reaction is to feel like, gosh, I failed then. But the second, then when I begin to unpack it, I've equipped them to achieve anything they could achieve. I've equipped them to meet the standards of the victory condition that we've set for them. That was the first thing. The second thing is, if I'd stayed with them and I deteriorated and gotten incapacitated or died, that compounds the problem that they have, and they don't have the skills to deal with that. So keeping, the purpose of allowing them to have an experience that pushes their comfort zone and achieve their victory condition, looking at back like that, I made the right call, because I can't be their problem. And so, that was that.
But if you die on that summit, you don't have any problems anymore.
True. You're absolutely right. I don't have any problems. You remind me of a discussion I had with one of my ex-wives, ex-husbands. It gets complicated, right? He was a banker, and he was like, "Oh, Erik, but you got to get like heaps of life insurance and because when you die," and I'm like, "But Harry, if I'm dead, it's not my problem."
It is not your problem anymore.
It's a very flippant way to look at it, but
absolutely,
you're right.
But speaking of family, you are busy with an insane amount of engagements all over the world. How does this fit in with your family time? And I think especially with those cute little twins of yours.
So the kids have always known that I travel a lot. And I mean, their mom and I got divorced separated just before they turned 3. So their frame of reference has always been dad's house, mom's house, because they don't remember much under the age of 3. And the interesting thing, with the kids, I've found is that kids are incredibly resilient and adaptable, far more so than adults. So that's the first thing, is that, I make a lot of time for them when I am around. I've moved back to Pretoria, closer to them. And so I see them just about every day. They do weekends with me, etc. And we have a really great relationship. Again, it's like my perspective of that. But for me, there's this little thing that I try and instill in them that I've codified and called the partnership model. And if you think about any relationship, any business, any endeavor, when you first start with it, there's this overwhelming feeling of glee. When you first met your significant other, they can do no wrong. It's just amazing. It's adventurous. It's awesome. But as the relationship progresses, you begin to realize that along with the glee, there are some fees. Anyone in a relationship with me, the fee is I travel a lot, sometimes for 3-4 weeks at a time. And when the fees begin to outweigh the glee in any relationship, think of your business and your client relationships as well. When a client first starts working with you, guaranteed they think you're brilliant. But then, some of my clients, they put me on 30 days. That's a bit of a fee, quite literally. And when the fees begin to outweigh the glee, we drop below this feeling of awesomeness and we begin to focus on me. I'm not getting enough of this. I'm not getting enough attention. My girlfriend tells me, Erik, you never tell me you love me anymore. Well, I told you 6 months ago, and I'll tell you if anything changes.
Oh, Mom, boy, and she's still with you.
That's just a joke. But when I become the most important thing in a business, in a relationship, the next thing that's easy to then do is to flee. And sometimes in relationships, people flee emotionally, but stay physically.
Mm-hmm.
But why do we stay together? You know, why? Because in every relationships and in every business, you've had these ups and downs. You have moments of glee. You have moments where the fees outweigh the glee, where it becomes about me. Why do we stay? We stay in relationships and in business because we can see what's possible through we.
Okay.
And then we move above this line of awesome. And this is what, I'm trying to instill with my kids, is that I want them to understand what's possible through we. Whether it's them and their mom, whether it's them and me, whether it's the four of us occasionally, like going to sports events and concerts and being involved in their life, and showing them that they create a meaning in my life.
Okay. That sounds like you are one of very few good divorced fathers out there.
Thank you very much.
But let's move on from that topic. Okay, so you've gone on a number of expeditions around the world. What would be your favorite that you would recommend for someone to do?
Two. There are two trips that I absolutely love. And the first is a mountain. And, people often will come to me and say, Erik, I want to do one mountain. To say I've done one of the 7 summits. Should I do Kili? And ironically, I say no. Because Kili it's in our backyard. It's in Africa. It's not much. It's a slightly different cultural experience, but it's kind of still in our backyard. So if you're going to do one mountain, I would always recommend Elbrus in Russia, because it's a complete cultural immersion, and it's just so different to anything else. You get to stay in, we fly to Moscow, we stay on Red Square, we fly to Mineral Vodi in the Vosges, and it's just an amazing mountain. And then I've alluded to the fact that, mountains are weird because you go up and you come down. And we've got one trip that for me is a journey. So any trip that starts in one place and finishes somewhere else, for me, is far more powerful as a metaphor for life. Mm-hmm. And we do an empty quarter crossing in the desert in the Middle East, all along the Saudi Arabian border. We do about 170 kilometers in 7 days from west to east across this geographical anomaly, I suppose, called the Liwa Crescent in Rab al Khali. So it's a crescent of date farms that you can actually see from space. And we literally walk through this desert, through nothingness for 7 days and finish at the 7-star resort called Qasr Al Sarab. So those are my two most iconic trips.
Okay. But you've mentioned the word backyard. A backyard slightly closer than Kili is obviously our country that we've got here in South Africa and all the options. And I'm just thinking back to, I think it was our very first podcast that we've done with Reina Christel just after himself and Ryan Sands did the trek around Lesotho. Have you done any local expeditions that you can recommend for our people that want to stay local?
I don't guide anything locally, not really. But so I was part of a team that set the 9 Peaks record in 2017. Just before, that got smashed. I think about a month or 6 weeks after we did it. But it comes back for me to what I said earlier on in our chat, was around what is adventure. Adventure is an endeavor of which the outcome is uncertain. And so getting into your car and going on a road trip that you haven't planned, and just seeing where it takes you. That's an adventure. And South Africa is full of that. I'm in a team for Adventure Racing World Championships in St. Francis in October. And so I've got a couple of ideas of what I want to do, just a couple of stretch events. And what I started doing late last year, also at the request of a client, is dads and lads hiking weekends, where we take dads and their sons, and we do like a long weekend, do some bonding, do some guided, facilitated discussions, but just enjoy each other's company in nature. We walk about 30 Ks over the course of 3 or 4 days. And, so that is, again, it subscribes to the construct of adventure, but it's not one of the 7 summits or Mafadi or a real nasty smash up physically. It's that good balance between getting out of our comfort zone and, all we have to do, all we have to aspire to in life is to regularly take small steps out of our comfort zone. If we can become comfortable with being uncomfortable, we set ourselves up for a lifetime of success.
That is definitely true. But something that intrigues me, obviously you're very active on social media and write a lot of things. Have you ever found that over all these years that you've been involved with social media and made passionate statements, have you ever regretted saying anything that you have said?
Have you gone and stalked me back through 2020 and before? So you know what? No, I've not regretted anything I've said. And the reason for that is, yes, and I've said some very controversial things, and gotten a lot of flack for it. And, like the ultimate insult on social media, right, is when someone unfriends you. Like, does that really matter? But have I regretted anything? No. And the reason I've not regretted anything is because I don't post as a knee-jerk reaction. I actually think things through before I post them. And what I post represents my mindset, my opinion at the time. And yes, they say that opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one. But is my opinion important? I don't know. I don't bother to think whether it's important or not. For me, it's important that I have the ability to express my thinking. And whilst there might be occasions a couple of months, a year, 2 years, 3 years later, that my view at the time might change, it was still my view at the time. And we spoke about, like failures and how that allows us to grow. So, no, I mean, I've never posted something and deleted it. And I don't think, yeah.
Okay, interesting, very interesting. Okay, so if you could be 20 years old again, would you change anything?
Yeah, I'd go and get a nice, cushy corporate job, do 9 to 5, get my bonuses, get my retirement.
Okay.
You don't believe that, do you?
No, I don't. Almost like your Facebook post that says you only sleep once a week.
Would I do things differently? In broad strokes, no. In granular detail, yes. I would look more carefully at contractual obligations. I've been at the wrong end of business decisions and partnerships on 2 occasions. I mean, the first business I started with 2 other guys. The one guy literally at a management meeting one evening said to us, "Look, the business is bankrupt. You 2 are out." And it cost us like 2 years of work, and that company is still going. And then the other one, was more recently with the Battle of the Sports, where the same story happened as well. In that the guy who I thought we were partners in this endeavor just kind of hoodwinked me. And, looking back, you can connect the dots because you can always do that in hindsight. So if I would do anything differently, it would probably be around being more granular in terms of details, because I'm not a very detail-oriented person by nature. Obviously, in certain areas, I learned to be, like planning and taking people on multi-week expeditions requires planning and preparation and that stuff. But I'm too trusting, That's the problem. Well, it's not a problem. I am who I am. But what would I do differently? I'd look at trust a little bit differently, and I would certainly be more granular in terms of detail orientation.
Okay. I was just thinking while you were talking, especially about the contractual side, that daughter of mine that was born in the same year that you started your business is now an attorney, or almost an attorney, and she could help you with your contracts. See, that's the advantages of kids. They grow up to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What would be the number one book that you would recommend to, I think, especially entrepreneurs, people that are in business for themselves? What book would you recommend?
There's a book by a guy named Hap Klopp, H-A-P, surname K-L-O-P-P, Hap Klopp. The book is called The Adventure of Leadership. And Hap Klopp was, so the book is about the adventure brand, the North Face. And the book details about how Hap Klopp took over the initial North Face company from the guy who actually started Patagonia. And how Hap, as CEO of the North Face, built that business up to it being the global icon that it is today. I mean, he sadly died, I think, about 3-4 years ago in a river rafting accident. But for me, that book is, if you're going to read one book, that's the one to read, The Adventure of Leadership.
Okay. I will definitely make a note of that. And any specific quotes that you live by, or is there a whole bunch of quotes?
I'm not a big fan of quotes, and I don't know why. Probably because I've got goldfish memory, so I never really remember them. But I do come across a lot, and I'm kind of at the point where I'm sort of formulating, I suppose, some of my own, which I publish quite often on my social media. But I think, for now, the kind of concept that really just jumps out is this whole idea of knowing that your mind will move your body in the direction of your dominant thought.
Very, very, very true. I suppose you've got a poster of that already.
There's lots of things on my social media and LinkedIn that I create on these little posters. Yeah.
Okay, so Erik, what would be your metaphorical mountains that you still want to climb within the next 3 to 5 years? Or is it just physical mountains?
No, I mean, I don't know if they. I mean, so from a physical perspective, and I keep getting the question, Everest. Do you want to do Everest? And I'm not sure I actually still want to do Everest anymore. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I do have some physical challenges that I do want to attempt. From a metaphorical perspective, I think my biggest challenge that I need to figure out in the next 5 years is what I want to do with the business and how I want to leave a legacy for my kids. So that's sort of the metaphorical mountain that I need to climb.
Would you like your kids to follow in your footsteps?
Gosh, I would like my kids to do what fulfills them and what creates meaning in their life.
Okay. And I assume you've taken them on a couple of adventures already.
Yeah, we head out to the hills as often as we can. But also, just it's for them, it's not always around finding a massive challenge or a big adventure. It's around finding little micro adventures. And we've recently, well, like a couple of months ago, discovered geocaching, and they want to go geocaching every chance we get.
What is
And they just
geocaching?
so there's an app. Well, I think there are probably several apps for geocaching, but it's this combination of it's like a treasure hunt. That you download the app and it tells you where these little caches are spread around your neighborhood or wherever you are, and you get clues, and it's around going there and trying to find this little piece of treasure that's been left. And it's normally just like a pull box with a list in that you write your name on, and then you log on the app that you found it. But it requires some thinking, some navigation, some scratching around, deciphering clues. They're absolutely loving that. So, that's the kind of little adventures that we do. And then, as I say, every now and then we do head out for an overnight or head to the mountains to get them outdoors. In my mind, anything I do with them that reduces screen time is a win.
Absolutely. And that's an ongoing battle, even if they become teenagers and students. The screen time is a massive problem. But just
it's so, sorry, Christelle. I mean, the screen time thing is so sad, and I've seen that not just with kids. I've seen it with adults as well. On our mountain expeditions, on Aconcagua, for example, there's a lot of downtime, waiting at base camp, acclimatizing, sitting in tents, and up until sort of 2020, there would be a lot of social time, and I encourage that. So I always take some cards and poker chips to the mountains that we're on and that sort of thing. And in 2020, there was a powerful shift in that everyone took their device. Everyone had downloaded movies and series onto their device. And on some of the mountains at base camps and some of the camps, there's actually Wi-Fi internet. And 2020 on Aconcagua, the social time just didn't happen. We'd have dinner together. We'd have a chat for 10, 15, 20 minutes afterwards. And everyone would go and get in their sleeping bag and get glued to their screen. So it's not just a kid's problem. It's a universal problem that we're losing our sense of community and how to interact with people.
Okay, so how are we going to get away from that?
Oh, gosh, I wish I knew the answer. I wish I knew the answer.
Okay, speaking just of getting away, a lot of people prefer to leave South Africa for the greener pastures of Europe and Canada, America, Australia. Is that something that's on your radar?
Short answer, no. Long answer, I never say never. The reason for saying no is I don't believe, load shedding notwithstanding, I don't believe you'll get the overall quality of life that you have in South Africa for the price point that you pay. I don't believe you'd get that anywhere else in the world. So that's why, and I mean, I've been working internationally for many years, and I just keep bringing the money, I bring the money back here, and I live a really fulfilling life here. Should you keep your options and things open though? Probably. My kids have Dutch passports, so they have an out. I'm stuck with a green mamba, so there probably isn't much opportunity at age 50 odd to be heading overseas. And you know what? If you think about leaving, and if you're happy with dividing your wealth by 20, starting all over again, that's a completely different set of challenges as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so you are staying in South Africa?
Yep, for the foreseeable future, unless a major opportunity comes along.
Oh my gosh, my gosh. Okay, so just getting back to your plans for the future, what would be your parting message?
My parting message would be to embrace an adventure mindset and accept the fact that nothing is confirmed, nothing is given to you, everything is uncertain, and live today like it's your last.